Welcome back to your favorite roofing channel. This is Rome Bailey. Today I wanted to go over flashing. So this is a critical component of your roof. And this is something that ideally you really want to have replaced every time you replace the roof. There are a few exceptions to this, which means if the flashing is in great condition, there weren't nails driven through it, then that is something that can potentially get replaced. So I want to cover two of the main types of flashing you're going to see depending on what kind of material your siding is on the home. Your dormers, anything that's kind of connected to the roof. And the big thing that's going to need to get swapped out is something called step flashing. So this is your L-shaped piece of metal. This is a typical piece, 4 inches by 4 inches. As you can see, it's thinner, it's pretty flexible. That way it's easier to bend and get underneath hardy and wood paneling. When you tear down to bare decking, the leak barrier is going to be the first component you want to go down. And then this is going to slip underneath that siding, and this is going to be laced under every single shingle. That way it can better protect your home. So one of the big things I run into too, and I won't get off on a tangent on this, but aesthetically, while it looks better to have your siding essentially hug the shingles, when that water's flowing down your roof, it rots it and it absorbs on that cut in that's not manufactured. Even if you have hardy, if it's a cut in that butts up against those shingles, it's going to absorb the water and it's going to get rotten. So we always document this ahead of a project being done because we want to anticipate when we're taking out that old step flashing or putting in that new step flashing that it's not going to damage the siding, and if it is, we try to stay ahead of those issues. That way it's not some crazy hidden cost that you're unaware of until we get into the project. So this gets laced under every single shingle, and that's going to reflash in you of what we call sidewalls or cheek walls, where your shingles essentially come into a wall. One thing that's important to note, roofing contractors especially, is if your home is made of stucco or brick as a siding, when it is built, the home is actually going to have the step flashing behind that material. It's going to have it behind the brick or the stucco. And while we want to make sure that we reflash the home properly, you're going to run into a lot more issues than you bargained for if you try and tear this original step flashing out and damage that brick or stucco. So what a better solution is, and what a lot of people opt to do, is when we're replacing that roof, we take out anything that's loose, and we can get out, that's great, but anything we can't, when we're installing the new shingles, we're going to lace this on the outside of the brick or stucco. And once you're done with that, you're going to see a bunch of loose ends, right? So obviously that's going to be susceptible to water. So what we go back with on top is something called counterflashing. So these are the two normal sizes. They're a little scratched up from being in my book bag and doing a lot of presentations, but these are the two kind of standard sizes we deal with for the most part. And this is your 4-inch, which is going to essentially cover your step flashing. So if it's not something that is flashed before, this is the first re-roof on a stucco or brick home, the 4-inch counter flashing may be a better option. That way it's just not so egregious or aesthetically not pleasing. And while I do think this is still a nice clean finished look, this is just going to be a little bit taller, and it's obviously still going to cover this. But I'll tell you another application where we almost have to use this instead of the 4-inch. But like as I stated, if it's the first re-roof going on a home that's stucco or bricko, I usually opt for the 4-inch. And this, the way it gets installed, once this is set, this gets installed on top. Masonry nails are typically driven through this, and then you have a bead of caulk that goes along the top for a nice finished look. I'll actually throw a picture up of what it looks like. We do white, black, or brown typically in this, but if you work alongside a metal manufacturer, you can typically get a color that's going to better match whatever paint you have or color theme you have going on with the home. So one of the exceptions when we have to go back with a wider counter flashing is if the home has already been re-roofed. Maybe this is the 3rd or 4th time that the home has been re-roofed. It's a much older home. And they have something called stair step flashing, which is an alternative to the counter flashing. I don't like it as much. Aesthetically, I don't like it. And also because it's a bunch of cut pieces of metal that are individually nailed, and over time they do kind of separate. Versus the counter flashing, we can have a nice, pretty solid piece of metal that's going to better deter that water away. And typically if the stair step flashing is already there, that's already going to be a little bit taller. And what you want to do is if you're removing an older piece of metal and the caulk line's lower, you want to get above that caulk line and recover it. Or any nails that were used to fasten that that previous flashing, you want to be able to get above those. That way you're not just seeing a bead of sealant that's sporadically covered above the flashing. You really want that flashing to just cover that whole thing in its entirety. And then there is the occasions where we just have to manufacture a wider piece of counterflashing to help cover those issues. Just to do a quick recap that are going to be flashed is any siding, what we call cheek walls, where the shingles meet a wall, where they meet something called a dormer or a doghouse that comes up on the home. And then chimneys is another really big issue. So outside of your pipe boots, your chimneys are the most problematic areas on the roof. So it's super, super important that those are flashed properly. And one thing I didn't want to leave out was your skylights, which usually come with flashing kits themselves. So they're a little bit outside of this field. Those are going to be special ordered to match your skylights. One thing you do want to ask your roofing contractor as a homeowner is, are they reflashing everything? Because little do they know, if they're a certified contractor, it might be required for that warranty. Thanks for watching, guys.